You might notice that sometime in the summer before this video came out, my backdrop looked completely different. Now the reason for the switch is that I'm a teacher, and like many other teachers, I'm starting this school year totally remote. Now, although I really enjoy making YouTube videos, the teaching thing is what actually pays my bills. Because of this, my main setup had to move to a room that I didn't mind being in, 5-6 hours a day. This was a really fun task for me to take on, because I'm a nerdy techie person. However, for a teacher who's been teaching for a long time and who might not be as comfortable with technology, this can be a tall feat. Because of that, I wanted to throw together a video showing you my teaching setup that you've seen in the past few videos. Mine is a little bit overkill, but hopefully you'll find something in there that's useful to you. Welcome to Home Teaching Setup 101. This is education. Let's get started. Now the core of this whole setup is my laptop, which is a 2020 16-inch MacBook Pro. Because I do music and video production work, I needed a workhorse. You don't need this computer to do this. However, it is more than powerful enough for what I'm doing with it. Now, it may look like I have a standing desk, but this computer is actually sitting on a 2-tiered keyboard stand. The piece of wood it's sitting on is just a shelf attachment from a desk that's in the other room. I'm using 3 of the 4 USB-C ports on here. I'm planning on getting a dock at some point, but this is what I'm currently running. I have my charging cable. I have a USB-C to Ethernet adapter. Now this is particularly useful because the Wi-Fi in this house gets used a lot. Whether it's streaming movies, streaming games, people doing other video conferencing, I really like the stability of being plugged directly into the router. If I'm just grading or browsing the web, sometimes I won't plug it in, but when I'm doing the actual Google Meets, it is a must-have. Now, A, because I don't have enough USB ports for all of my peripherals here, and B, because I don't want to have to plug in 6 things every time I put my computer here, I have a USB hub running over to this bookshelf. This USB hub, even though it's really kind of more of a mini dock, has 4 things plugged into it. First things first, and probably the most useful out of all of them, is this second monitor. This was just an old Samsung monitor that I had lying around. Any second monitor works. I actually used the iPad for a while, but then I realized, I want to use my iPad for other things. So I actually just set up this monitor. This is not only great because it lets me keep my presentation open in one screen and then the Google Meet open in the other screen, but it actually keeps my eyes closer to the camera. This is where I would be looking if I was looking at a Google Meet. This is where I'm looking if I'm looking at my laptop. It helps me feel more engaged with the students if they can see that I'm looking pretty much at them. When I'm delivering something, if I'm just talking, I look directly into the camera lens. But even when they're talking, it's a lot nicer to look at someone who's looking just below the camera than it is to be talking to your teacher and having their head down like this. Because this monitor is big enough, it has a lot of real estate, I can put my Google Meet on one side of it and then put my attendance, email, anything else I need on the other side, separate from the presentation that's down on my monitor. Now, I don't know if you can hear this, but the fan on the MacBook is actually turning on. This is one thing that's not too great about this setup, is that when you're running Google Meet and you're sharing your screen, it has to record your screen and encode it. The fans on these things start going crazy and it picks up into the mic pretty loud. For this reason, I'm actually going to be switching out this piece of wood for something that isn't solid soon. However, when you're just grabbing stuff around the house, you just got to grab whatever works. I'm honestly just going to leave it because I want this to be a realistic representation of my teaching setup. Now, the other 3 things plugged into that USB hub are an audio interface. I have a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 that I use for mobile stuff like this. My HDMI capture card running out of this Vixia GX10. We'll get back to that one later. And lastly, this Wacom drawing tablet. Wacom? Wacom? Wacom. I don't know. This is a really old tablet, and in fact, the drawing surface on it is pretty small. I just had this lying around. However, I've especially been using it for the past few weeks, and it makes it feel like you're actually drawing on a whiteboard. There's something so stiff feeling about having everything pre-written on slides and on pictures, stuff like that. The ability to open up a whiteboard and actually draw on it and present it so the students can see it lets you actually guide their learning. It lets you draw things in real time. It keeps it so there isn't just a ton of information at once that they have to decipher as you're talking about it. Especially being a music teacher, this is great because I can just keep 5 staff lines there, draw stuff, erase it, draw stuff, erase it. And you don't have to have that awkward drawing with the mouse or drawing with the trackpad. It looks natural. You're drawing with a pencil. Now, to round off everything on this keyboard stand, I do have an actual digital piano. This is the Casio CDP S100. It's a fine piano. It's not anything super special. I literally bought it just in case I was going somewhere that didn't have either a tuned piano or a digital piano. I have a nicer Yamaha that I use for when I play gigs, but this one's great just for throwing around and for keeping in this room. Speaking of that, and speaking into this, let's talk about audio for a second. This is one of those things that is totally overkill. You don't have to have this if you are doing virtual teaching. This is just stuff I have, and I'm a total perfectionist about this stuff, so I decided to use it. This microphone is the Shure SM7B. I absolutely love it. I use it to record vocals. It's really an awesome microphone. It is way more expensive of a microphone than you need to do this. One of the things about this microphone in particular that makes it more expensive is A, it needs a ton of gain, so I actually have a phantom powered preamp before it goes into my interface. Then you also, need an interface. Luckily, as I mentioned, I've just accumulated a lot of equipment, so I had an extra interface lying around. Now, you don't need a mic that's this expensive. However, I would recommend a dynamic mic, USB or XLR, analog, it doesn't matter. The reason being is that the drop off is more, so that if you get close to it, it helps isolate your voice from the sounds happening around you. This arm, although it looks fancy, I got off Amazon. I think it was about $60. For a while, I was using this cheaper $20 one. However, I over-tightened it and literally blew the bottom right off of it. Remember that you don't have to over-tighten things, just tighten them enough. To get the piano into the interface, I'm simply running an 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch cable from the headphone jack of the piano. This piano, oddly enough, doesn't have any 1/4 inch outputs. The only analog output that it has is the headphone jack. Because of this, the cable that I'm using is actually a stereo to mono summing cable. What that means is that it takes the left and right channel from the piano and it merges them together into one signal. That's great because the 1/4 inch jack of the Focusrite is mono, so with the stereo sounds on this piano, you'd lose either the high or the low end. So if you're doing a web conference or video chatting, and you're using Zoom or Google Meet, you can just go into your settings and select the Focusrite as your audio input, and that will do the job. It will take the two channels and mix them to mono unless you tell it to do otherwise. However, I am a nerd and a perfectionist, which is a deadly combination, and so I didn't want my audio and my video to be out of sync. So here's what I did. Now, I have a digital mixer that I could do this with and avoid some of this unnecessary trouble. However, I really like the preamps on the Focusrite. They're much cleaner than the digital mixer, and whatever, I wanted to use it. So what I'm doing is the following. I ran the mic and the piano into the Focusrite. Then I opened the digital audio workstation Reaper. I like Reaper because it doesn't use a lot of resources. There are other software-based mixers and stuff you could use. I'm just really familiar with Reaper. I like it. It's low resource load, makes it feasible for this type of thing. Now, in order to get everything routed the way I wanted to, I actually had to set up an aggregate device on my Mac. An aggregate device is wonderful because it lets you use different audio devices all at the same time. In this case, I'm using the Focusrite as well as the headphone output of the Mac. Here is why. To start with the mic, I lowered the buffer on Reaper as much as I could to reduce the latency without causing it to get all gross and bubbly sounding. Then I processed the mic the way I wanted to. In this case, I'm using a noise gate, a high pass filter, a compressor, a de-esser, and then just a limiter. Then I turned on the monitoring for the microphone. Monitoring plays the processed sound as it's coming in. This is great if you're recording a song so you can hear yourself in the headphones. However, I'm using it for two purposes here. Because I have the aggregate device, I have access to the Focusrite and my headphone jack on the Mac. The first place I send it is actually to my headphones. I'm using in-ear monitors, and because they form a seal and make it so I can't really hear my own voice, I monitor into my headphones so that I can hear what I'm saying and don't feel like I have to yell. The other place I'm sending it is actually just out of the main output jack of the Focusrite. Here's where it gets a little silly, but kind of necessary. I'm trying to get the sound into my camera so that I can actually bring the sound in with the camera feed and not separately. Because of this, I need to get from the line level signal of the Focusrite to the mic level input of the camera. And I'm doing this with a DI box and a whole bunch of adapters. So I'm running the 1/4 inch output out of the Focusrite into just a cheap live wire DI box. This is just the Guitar Center brand. I got it for like $25. Then I'm plugging that into an XLR female to 1/4 inch female adapter. Then I'm plugging that into a mono 1/4 inch to dual mono 1/8 inch adapter. What that does is it takes the one signal coming out of the DI, which would normally end up only on the left, and it puts it on both the left and the right channel evenly. Then I'm just running a simple 1/8 inch aux cable up into the stereo microphone jack of my camera. That way, as you can see on the bottom right, the sound from my microphone is actually going straight into the camera. And that exact setup is how I get the sound into the camera for these videos. I don't sync it up afterwards. I usually just record direct in. With the piano, I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm running it into the Focusrite 2i2, monitoring it to both my headphones and into the camera, so again, it's synced up. It also helps because I don't have the sound of the piano in the room. It's just going in and I listen to it through the headphones. Last two things I want to mention about sound. A, the sound from my computer is just leaving through the headphone jack, so it mixes in with the sound from the mic and the piano, and I can hear the students in my headphones. This is a small thing, but I would really recommend using headphones. That way it's not going to cut off the other person talking if you start talking over them. Small, but helpful. The other thing I want to mention about sound is this big white blanket hanging over the door. This is an actual sound blanket that I got from Vocal Booth To Go. It's the Producer's Choice 6 foot 8 inch by 8 foot sound blanket. It has little grommets on it too. It has grommets on it. This is wonderful because there are other people who live here. It doesn't completely block the sound, but it takes it down just enough that it gives the room a sense of isolation. The biggest thing it does is it cuts down the reflections from outside. If I was to clap without it, you would hear the echo from the rest of the house. However, this makes it so it's a nice deadened sound. It's a lot more intimate. It also just makes the sound of the microphone a little bit more focused. All right, now for the looks. Video. This is probably where my setup becomes a little more overkill. First off, the camera, as I mentioned, that I'm using is the Canon Vixia GX10. You do not need this camera, but if you're interested in it, I put a link down below. Beneath the camera, I have a mini desktop mic stand with a 5/8 inch to 1/4 inch adapter, which gets you from microphone land to camera land. And on top of that, I have a little mini ball head mount so I can move the camera, tilt it if it's not quite sitting on those books right. And that's one of the things you may have noticed. This arm, the monitor, the audio interface, and the camera are all just sitting on a bookshelf. It was already in this room. You know what? Use what you have. For me, the thing that makes this camera most useful in this situation is that it has what's called a clean HDMI out. That means that you can send the HDMI port without any overlays, displays, anything like that. It's literally just the video feed. Along with this, that clean HDMI signal also transmits audio. As I mentioned, that's how I get my audio in sync, is I run it straight into the camera so that it's all coming in at the same time. For my video and microphone, I select the HDMI capture card, so it's just reading the one signal coming in and I don't have to worry about adjusting it either way. This is also great because it has autofocus, so I can move around, I can hold things up close to the camera and it will focus on them. It just makes it something I don't have to worry about. Now, as you've seen so far in this video, I have a window behind me and a window to my left. There's a lot of natural light in here, but none of it is coming from the front. There is a brown wall with a map on it directly in front of me. That doesn't reflect a ton of light, and the light that it does reflect is blue because of the map. So rather than looking like a Smurf, I figured I'd put a light up. This is the same softbox that I normally have up in that treated room that I was filming in before. This is great because no matter how bright it gets outside, the lighting's always even on me. A link to those softboxes is down below. They're actually pretty inexpensive and I use them all the time. As you can see, I have it up and off to the side, so it gives me those nice depthy shadows. Frankly, I couldn't get it as far enough over as I wanted, so I actually just stuck a thing of Post-it notes under one of the feet. Like the piece of wood here, that is something I am going to update and make more secure and proper in the future. But you know what? 90% of this falls under the category of works for now. This light behind me does literally nothing other than just make the background a little bit brighter. It adds a little bit of depth to the room. It's also an incandescent color. It's an LED, but it's incandescent balanced. So it adds a little orange splash in the back, whereas the softbox is daylight balanced. Now, this is a standing desk situation. I do stand when I teach. However, I do have a stool for when I'm just responding to emails and stuff, and I'll actually tip my laptop screen forward so that I'm level with that. I'll put links to all this stuff down below, but again, I had all of it already. It's totally overkill for what I'm doing here. Now, if these concepts intrigued you and you wanted to try something similar, go over to my website, daglespage.com. I'll be posting a blog post with a budget version of this setup so that you don't have to spend multiple 4 digits to get this stuff. Share this video with any teachers that not only are looking for help setting up, but also who just appreciate nerdy techie setups for things. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave some comments down below with your setups, things you found interesting, or things that you're interested in trying from this video. And there we go, teaching in 2020. Thank you for stopping by, and I will see you next time.